Sometimes the smallest voices carry the heaviest pain. When a little black girl stood on the roadside selling her bike, no one knew her reason would silence a group of roaring bikers and change their hearts forever. The morning sun had barely lifted above the horizon when a soft, golden light spilled across the empty highway. The world was quiet, except for the hum of distant traffic and the rustle of dry grass swaying in the wind. On the side of that long, forgotten road stood a little girl named Zara. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, her small hands gripping the handlebars of an old, dusty bicycle that looked like it had carried more memories than miles. A piece of cardboard hung loosely from the handle with uneven letters written in a shaky hand. For sale, $20. The sign fluttered with every passing breeze, just like the strands of her hair that kept falling into her eyes. She brushed them away and stood still, her shoes dusty, her eyes swollen and red from a night without sleep. But she didn't move. She didn't cry anymore. She just waited. Cars passed her every few minutes, polished, fast, and distant. A few slowed down out of curiosity, their drivers glancing for a second before turning away. No one wanted to meet her eyes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was discomfort. There was something about a child standing alone with a for sale sign that forced people to look at their own hearts. And most weren't ready for that. So they drove on, pretending they hadn't seen her. Then came a sound that shattered the silence, a deep, thunderous rumble that grew louder and louder until the air itself seemed to vibrate. A line of motorcycles appeared in the distance, their engines growling like wild beasts. There were 6 of them, men in leather jackets with patches and scars, helmets gleaming under the sun. Their laughter echoed through the empty road, a sharp contrast to the loneliness that had lingered there moments before. As they approached the little girl, their leader, a tall man with broad shoulders, slowed his bike, signaling the others to do the same. They parked their roaring machines in a line, dust rising beneath their boots. One of the bikers, a tattooed man with mirrored sunglasses, grinned and tilted his head toward Zara. "Well, look at that," he said, his voice rough from years of smoke and wind. "A little lady trying to make a sale, huh? What's the story, kid? Need money for candy? Ice cream?" His voice carried a teasing tone, but Zara didn't smile. Her small fingers tightened around the handle of her bike. She looked down, her lips trembling, as if the question had touched something too heavy to answer. Her silence stretched longer than it should have, and the laughter of the bikers began to fade into awkward quiet. Then, in a voice so small that it almost disappeared into the wind, she said, "Buy my bike, sir. Mom didn't make it home last night." The sound of engines ticking in the background faded into nothing. For a moment, the entire world stopped moving. The smirk vanished from the tattooed biker's face. Every man in that group went still, their eyes hidden behind dark lenses, but their postures softening. The leader, a man named Logan, slowly removed his helmet. His face was weathered, the kind that had seen too many miles, too many regrets. A faint scar ran down his cheek, but his eyes, deep, gray, and tired, showed something the others didn't. He understood pain. He crouched down beside Zara, his voice low and calm. "What do you mean, kid?" Zara blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. Her voice quivered as she spoke. She told them about her mother, Grace, a nurse who worked night shifts at the city hospital. She was supposed to come home the previous night, but a drunk driver ran a red light on her way back. The police came instead. They told Zara that her mother didn't make it. There was no one else, no relatives, no friends nearby, just her, alone in that tiny apartment filled with her mother's things and a silence she didn't know how to live with. She glanced down at her bicycle and whispered, "I thought if I sell it I could pay for her funeral." Her voice broke on the last word. She tried to stay strong, tried to swallow the tears, but they came anyway, quietly, the way grief sneaks up on those too young to understand it. Logan looked at her, his jaw tightening. He wanted to say something comforting, but no words came. Behind him, the other bikers shifted uneasily. These were men used to rough roads and harder lives, but none of them had the courage to look at that child and pretend they didn't feel something breaking inside. Logan reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He took out a few bills, then nodded toward the others. "We'll take care of it," he said softly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Zara looked up, confused. "But I need the money," she said. Logan shook his head. "Keep your bike, kid. You're gonna need it. Let us handle the rest." There was no grand speech, no big moment. Just a silence that spoke louder than words. One by one, the bikers started pulling out their wallets, their chains, even their rings. The tattooed man who'd mocked her earlier took off his silver bracelet and placed it gently on her bike seat. Another slipped a $100 bill into her hand without saying anything. The sound of engines returned, softer this time. Not as noise, but as promise. The road that once carried loneliness now carried compassion. Zara didn't fully understand who these men were or why they were helping, but as she looked at them standing there, she felt something she hadn't felt since her mother's last goodbye. Hope, and in that quiet moment by the roadside, surrounded by strangers who looked nothing like heroes, a little girl's broken world began to shift. Not because someone bought her bike, but because someone cared enough not to. For a long moment, no one moved. The highway stood still as if the world itself was holding its breath. The faint hum of a passing breeze was the only sound that dared to fill the silence. Zara sniffled, her small hand wiping away the tears that refused to stop. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the $20 sign that meant nothing now, just a cardboard reminder of the pain she was trying to bury. Logan stood in front of her, his helmet dangling loosely from his fingers. He looked down at the little pink bike, its paint chipped, the training wheels rusted, and a sticker half peeled from the frame that still read, "Mom's Angel." His throat tightened. He'd seen battlefields, loss, betrayal, but something about that sticker and that child broke through every wall he'd built to survive. He took a deep breath, his voice rough but steady. "Keep your bike, kid," he said quietly. "We'll take care of everything." Zara blinked up at him, confusion in her eyes. "But I need the money, sir," she whispered. Her voice was fragile, like a leaf in the wind. Before she could finish, one of the bikers stepped forward. He was a large man with a beard and eyes that carried warmth despite his intimidating size. His name was Tucker. Without saying much, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a thick fold of cash and pressed it into Zara's little hand. "That's for your mom, sweetheart," he said softly. "Keep your bike. You'll need it when you're ready to ride again." Zara looked down at the money, then back up at the man. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say thank you, but the words wouldn't come. Another biker stepped forward, taking off the silver chain around his neck and dropping it onto the seat of her bike. "Add this too," he muttered. Another removed his ring and tossed it in. Then another pulled a leather bracelet from his wrist, saying, "She deserves more than we ever gave the world." One by one, each man added something. Money, jewelry, tokens that once meant something to them. It wasn't about value. It was about heart. Logan stood quietly watching them. These men weren't saints. They'd lived hard lives, fights, regrets, mistakes. But in that moment, they were human in the purest way. He turned to them, his voice steady and low. "We ride for grace," he said. The others nodded without hesitation. It wasn't just a statement. It was a promise. Engines roared to life again, the sound rising into the open air like a heartbeat returning after being still too long. Logan crouched down beside Zara, offering a faint smile. "Come on," he said. "You lead the way." Zara hesitated, unsure if this was real, but when Logan nodded, she swung her leg over her small bicycle. The seat was too high. She wobbled a little, steadying herself. Then, with a deep breath, she started pedaling. Behind her, 6 roaring machines followed in a perfect line. To any passerby, it looked absurd. A tiny pink bike leading a convoy of black motorcycles. But to those who saw it, something sacred was happening on that road. The group rode through town, the sound of engines echoing off the walls of quiet buildings. People paused what they were doing. Store owners stepped outside. Families stopped mid-conversation. Children pressed their faces against windows. Everyone stared as the unlikely parade rolled past. A little girl in front, her small bike wobbling slightly, followed by men who looked like outlaws but rode with reverence. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. Some laughed softly in disbelief, others just watched in silence. None of them knew the story. None of them understood the kind of heartbreak that had united those souls on that road. As they neared the hospital, the roar of the bikes softened. The engines quieted to a low rumble before shutting off completely. The air grew heavy again, this time filled not with tension but with respect. The hospital's glass doors slid open, and a few nurses stepped out, confused at first, then shocked when they recognized the little girl standing at the front. Zara clutched a single white flower in her hand. She looked at the building, at the faces she remembered from nights waiting for her mother to finish her shift. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you, Mama." She climbed the steps slowly and laid the flower on the hospital's entrance mat. Behind her, Logan removed his helmet again, bowing his head. The others followed one by one, their shadows stretching across the pavement like quiet prayers. For the first time in years, not a single engine made a sound. The usual chaos of the bikers was replaced by something sacred: stillness, grief, and an unspoken unity. Zara turned back to them, her eyes glistening in the afternoon light. She didn't say a word, but her small nod was enough. It was gratitude, raw, unfiltered, and heavy. Logan met her gaze, a faint smile flickering at the edge of his face. He didn't speak either. He didn't have to. Everyone there understood what it meant. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of fuel and flowers into the distance. The little pink bike leaned against Logan's motorcycle, a strange pairing that somehow made perfect sense. For a group of men who had spent their lives running from pain, a little girl had stopped them in their tracks and reminded them of something they'd long forgotten: compassion. And as they stood outside that hospital, heads bowed, no one noticed the tears hidden behind mirrored glasses. They just stood together, in silence, letting the sound of the wind fill the space where words no longer belonged. That evening, the bikers gathered at Logan's garage, a dimly lit place that smelled of oil, metal, and memories. Old helmets hung on the walls, and dusty photographs told stories of wild roads and lost friends. But tonight, the laughter and loud music were gone. There was only silence, the kind that sits heavy in a man's chest. Logan stood near his old Harley, hands on the handlebars, thinking about the little girl with tear-streaked cheeks and a heart far braver than her years. Tucker, the gentle giant of the group, finally broke the silence. "Boss," he said quietly, his voice gruff but trembling a little, "we can't just give her cash and walk away. That kid's alone now. She needs more than money." Logan looked up slowly. The deep lines on his face softened as he replied, "You're right. We're not just paying for a funeral. We're giving her back a life, something her mother would have wanted." The men exchanged glances. Rough bikers with tattoos, scars, and hardened eyes. Yet tonight their hearts felt raw. Logan pulled a crumpled photo from his pocket. His own mother, smiling beside a bike she'd helped him fix as a boy. "My mom believed every ride meant something," he murmured. "So let's make this one count." That's when the idea struck. A tribute ride. Not just a few men on bikes, but a movement. They called it Ride for Grace. It would honor Zara's mother and raise awareness for all those lost to drunk driving. The men sprang into action. Tucker made phone calls. Another biker, Benji, started designing flyers. Someone else called local news outlets. Within hours, the story of a little girl trying to sell her bike for her mom's funeral began to spread online. By morning, Logan's phone was buzzing non-stop. Bikers from nearby towns and even other states wanted to join. Strangers donated money. Families sent messages saying they'd lost loved ones too and wanted to ride in Grace's name. The movement had begun. The next day, the sun shone bright, the kind of light that feels like a small blessing. Logan's garage turned into a gathering ground. Motorcycles lined the street like an iron army, chrome gleaming, engines rumbling softly in anticipation. And then, through the crowd, Zara appeared. She wore her mother's old nurse jacket, the sleeves too long for her tiny arms, but she held herself with quiet dignity. Logan walked up and smiled softly. "You ready, kid?" Zara looked up, eyes shining. "For Mom," she whispered when the engines roared to life. The sound was deafening, but not in a wild or reckless way. It was powerful, unified, and purposeful. Hundreds of bikes thundered through the city, their headlights forming a river of gold down the highway. The air was thick with emotion. People on sidewalks waved. Some placed their hands on their hearts. Others simply cried. Children pointed and smiled as the convoy passed, unaware of the pain and love driving those engines. Each bike carried a small banner that read, "Ride for Grace. Save a life. Don't drink and drive." The sight was breathtaking. Helicopters filmed from above. News anchors called it the Ride of Compassion. But for Logan and his crew, it wasn't about the cameras. It was about Zara, a child who reminded them that even in the darkest pain, something good could still grow. After an hour, the convoy reached the quiet intersection where Grace had lost her life. The traffic lights flickered softly, the road freshly cleaned after rain. Zara's small hands gripped her handlebars tightly as she looked at the spot. The bikers turned off their engines one by one. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Logan took off his helmet, placed it on his bike seat, and walked with Zara to the roadside. She carried a bouquet of white roses, her favorite flowers for her mother. She knelt down slowly and laid them where the accident happened. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the faint scent of roses and gasoline. Zara's voice trembled as she whispered, "I hope you can see me, Mom." Logan swallowed hard, his throat tight. He bent down, placed his large, rough hand gently on her shoulder and said, "She can, kid, and she's proud of you." A single tear slipped from his eye, landing in the dust near the flowers. Around them, the bikers stood silently, heads bowed, their leather jackets fluttering in the wind. A nurse from the hospital where Grace once worked arrived quietly, holding a small candle. She lit it beside the flowers, whispering, "For Grace, and every mother who gave her all." The crowd followed, one by one, lighting candles until the roadside shimmered with a soft, glowing light. As the sun began to set, the sky turned golden-orange, painting everything in warmth. Zara climbed back on her little bike, her mother's jacket flapping behind her like wings. Logan started his engine and the others followed. This time, they didn't race or roar. They rode slowly, in silence, letting the moment speak for itself. That night, news channels across the country played the footage. A child leading a sea of bikers through the streets, a symbol of hope, love, and change. But for Logan, Tucker, and the crew, it wasn't about fame. It was about Grace, a woman they never met but who somehow brought them all together. And as they rode under the stars, Logan whispered to himself, "Sometimes, angels don't have wings. Sometimes they ride." Weeks passed since the thunder of engines last echoed through the town. The ride for Grace had changed more than just hearts. It had rewritten lives. For Zara, those long empty nights filled with silence and grief had slowly begun to soften. The town, once filled with strangers who drove past her without a glance, now knew her name. And the bikers, rough men who once lived for the road and the roar, had become her silent guardians. Logan visited often, never empty-handed. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes flowers for Grace's resting place, but mostly he brought stories. Stories that made Zara laugh again. She had started to smile, not because she forgot her mother, but because she was learning that love doesn't die. It simply changes form. Now, Zara lived with a foster family, the same couple who had helped the biker group arrange her schooling and find her a stable home. They were kind people, quiet and patient, with a small house surrounded by sunflowers. The woman, Evelyn, reminded her a little of her mom, soft-spoken but strong. Every morning, Evelyn packed Zara's lunch with a handwritten note tucked inside. "You are loved." For the first time in weeks, Zara woke up to the smell of pancakes instead of loneliness. She still kept her old bike, though. It leaned against the fence outside, dusty, the training wheels still attached, its paint faded. She couldn't bear to part with it. That bike had carried her through her hardest moment, and to her it wasn't just metal and rubber, it was memory. On her first day back to school, Zara stood by the door in her clean uniform clutching her small backpack. The morning sun painted the sky a soft gold. She felt nervous, her heart thumping fast, her hands fidgeting with the zipper. Evelyn gave her a reassuring smile and kissed her forehead. "You've got this, sweetheart," she said. Zara nodded, but inside she still felt the ache. The empty seat at breakfast, the missing voice that used to tell her, "Be brave, my little angel." When she stepped outside, something blue caught her eye. There, right by the gate, stood a brand new bicycle, sky blue with silver handles, polished so brightly it shimmered in the light. A small note hung from the handlebar, written in bold, uneven handwriting. "From your biker family. Keep riding, keep shining." Zara froze. Her eyes widened as her fingers brushed the card. The handwriting was messy, probably Logan's. For a moment she just stood there, speechless, her heart pounding. Then a smile spread across her face, small at first, then wide and full of life. She climbed onto the bike, the seat just her size, and began to pedal. The wheels turned smoothly, gliding down the street like wings on wind. Her laughter filled the air, soft, musical, free. And then, faintly at first, she heard it, the deep, familiar rumble of engines. She turned her head and saw them, Logan and his biker crew, riding slowly behind her in formation, engines low, helmets glinting in the sunlight. They weren't escorting her this time. They were simply there, like shadows of love, reminding her she was never alone. Neighbors came out of their houses, waving. Some clapped. Others took photos as the strange little parade passed by. A young girl on a bright blue bike, followed by a trail of bikers dressed in black leather. It looked almost like a dream, like something the heart imagined when it needed proof that goodness still existed. Zara pedaled faster, wind rushing through her hair, her laughter mixing with the growl of engines. Behind her, Logan smiled beneath his helmet. He didn't need to say anything. The sight alone was enough. A child healed by kindness, a lost soul finding her way home. As they reached the edge of town, the sunlight spilled across the road like a river of gold. The bikers slowed down, letting Zara ride ahead. Logan looked up at the sky, where the clouds drifted lazily and murmured softly, "You did good, Grace." It felt as though the world itself paused to listen. Somewhere in the wind, the warmth of the sun felt like a mother's embrace. The narration rose softly, like music carried by breeze. Sometimes, it takes the innocence of a child to awaken the humanity buried deep inside us. Zara lost her mother that night, but she gained something the world rarely gives, a family born not of blood, but of heart. Zara turned back and waved, her little hand bright against the sunlight. The bikers waved back, their engines humming in rhythm with her laughter. She rode on, her shadow stretching ahead, her mother's old jacket tied to her bag like a banner of strength. As the scene faded, the voice of the narrator spoke once more, low and tender. "Never judge people by their looks. Real hearts beat beneath leather and scars, and kindness, real kindness, can roar louder than any engine." The camera lingered on one final image, a framed photo of Grace, smiling in her nurse uniform surrounded by flowers and a tiny blue toy bike beside it. The wind rustled gently through the petals, and in that quiet moment the faint sound of engines blended with the breeze. Not loud, not wild, but peaceful. It was the sound of healing, of new beginnings, and of love that never truly ends.